This next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Brian in Delaware. Last week on The Experience, Jim brought up Ace Darling and Devon Storm. Growing up, Jim Kettner ran the ECWA in my area, and I went to many shows in the early to mid-1990s where those two were stars and typically had one WWF guy on every card. I still have programs from around here somewhere, but I was wondering if Jim ever had any dealings with other talents from the ECWA or has any stories involving its WWF partnership. And then in parentheses, he named a few guys here, Jim. Cheetah Master, Glenn Osborne, Boogie Woogie Brown, Mike Mayhem, Mr. Ooh La La, Rockin' Ronnie, Primo Carnero III, to name a few talents off memory.
Well, I several of the first ones, and I worked for Jim Kettner a time or two at his ECWA building in Newark. And he, of course, he was a friend of Dennis Corluzzo's, and I don't remember whether I met Jim before I went up to Stamford or not to work in the office, but as part of what I did in the office, I was doing the third-party booking. And not only that, but at some points, I was booking the job guys for TV. So I always kept a relationship with not only Dennis, but Jim and Blaine DeSantis down in Reading. The guys that ran legitimate shows, or in Dennis's case, semi-legitimate shows, and weren't going to fucking do things stupid if we booked WWF talent on their shows, especially Jim. He was very old school. They weren't going to be asked to do anything embarrassing or stupid or whatever. And also tried to get like Ace and Devon and Cheetah Master was a good kid. Glenn Osborne, I always got them booked, either in, TV matches or, just to be extras where they could be around and hopefully somebody look at them at some point. And they always did because they showed up, they did a good job. They looked good and they were the cream of the crop. And some of the other guys, oh goddamn, what was his, shit, you just called it.
Boogie Woogie Brown.
Boogie Woogie. Here was the thing with Boogie Woogie Brown. He was this black guy, and I think he was an advanced age for one of the boys. Even then, he was in like his 40s or whatever. But he was a gimmick, and he had great music that they brought him out to, and he had a great entrance, and he didn't do stupid shit that embarrassed the business, at least when I saw him. But he worked a normal style, but he was older. He was out of shape, but he was over with the crowd in their building. And so that he didn't get booked on WWF TV, and he understood why, but he enjoyed being part of the business and working there. And he was a good guy. So, but all of those guys, they did real good shows. And like I said, Blaine, who I think was an attorney in Reading, but he promoted there for 20 years or more, on a independent basis. And also Alpha was running up around Hazleton at that point, and you'd stay in touch with all of those guys, and you'd give their best guys a chance to be seen, and or send our guys that the WWF guys that didn't have a full booking sheet and had some days off. You'd send them down there to hopefully draw the locals a house and get them an extra payoff. That's basically wrestling.
To tie it into what we were talking about a little bit earlier with All Elite starting up and WWE's response to it, this is kind of in the 90s. This was during this period of time where you were with WWF and WCW and WWF were fighting over talent. With something like ECWA or any independent, if you hear that WCW is interested in someone, are you jumping on it? Or like, how are you reacting to like these guys in the Northeast if you hear that there's any interest whatsoever?
Well, at that point, there wasn't a big sense of urgency on unknown talent. It was all on the stars. What stars are going to jump? What stars contracts are up? That's all they cared about. The guys on the independents, whenever I heard, we told the story about me trying to tell Larry Sharp, hey, just have Paul White have one fucking match. So I got a tape to send to Vince and I'll get you a fucking deal. And of course they snapped him up in WCW before he even had that match. If I would hear about it, I would usually be happy for the guy that he was getting an opportunity, because if one of the guys that I liked was getting an opportunity somewhere else, that had meant that I couldn't drum up any interest for him there. So, and to be honest, once again, if it was the independent guys that nobody really knew and hadn't done any TV at that point. If I'd have gone back and said, hey, WCW is going to hire Devin Storm, Vince would have looked at me like I farted near his fucking yogurt. And he said, why do I care? You know, that was it wasn't about finding the newer guys at that point. And until we actually, it was 98, 99, and they started realizing, well, we're starting to run out of people. And then they wanted to train their own for a couple of years. And they remember even when fucking Laurinaitis was running talent relations, they didn't give a shit about the independent guys. They wanted to find guys from scratch. They were passing up the guys who went to wrestling school on their own nickel and worked shows at a loss a lot of times because they wanted to be wrestlers and they wanted to get better, and finally had gotten somewhat of a good reputation, you know, on the independent scene for having some kind of name, and they were passing them up for lingerie models and fucking bodybuilders because they wanted to train them from scratch, who only wanted to be wrestlers because you were giving them a fucking contract for 6 figures a year. I'd like to have taken all those fuckers and taken a goddamn backhoe and just burying them up under the fucking dam. But that's just me.
Our next question, Jib, was sent
Did I get off the topic there? Just slightly, I guess I did.